Resident Evil has always put a great deal of emphasis on story and storytelling, and though it certainly stumbled at times in the narrative department, by and large, it's definitely been a series worth following. The upcoming Resident Evil Village, in particular, has got a lot of fans excited, which makes sense considering it's the next mainline entry in the series. Not only is it promising to move the plot forward in significant ways, it also looks like it's going to tie in the stories of several previous games in the franchise, which is an exciting prospect, especially for Resident Evil fans. Of course, there's plenty of theories floating around about what may or may not happen in Village, and as is often the case with theories, a lot of them don't make a lick of sense. But then again, there are a few that do make some sense and might actually end up being at least a little accurate. Here, we're going to talk about a few such theories. A quick note before we move forward. Please consider subscribing and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. And while you are at it, also please click like if you enjoyed this video. It really helps us out. With that out of the way, let's begin. Umbrella is still around. That Umbrella Corporation is going to be a factor in Resident Evil Village's plot to at least some extent is not a theory, it's pretty much a fact. We've seen the Umbrella logo quite prominently a couple of times in the game's trailer at this point, but exactly how heavily they're going to be involved remains to be seen. While it's possible that the game goes into the history of Umbrella without actually making the shady company an active part of the ongoing plot, sort of like RE5, we think there's actually a pretty good chance that RE Village sees Umbrella rising from the ashes once again. The mechanics of that are a little hard to figure out, what with Blue Umbrella having been introduced in Resident Evil 7 and them seemingly being the good guys, but it's quite possible that that's just a front for the real Umbrella. Albert Wesker isn't dead.
This isn't over, Chris.
Albert Wesker is by far the greatest villain Resident Evil has ever had as a series, and ever since his death in RE5, the series has failed to introduce another antagonist that comes even close to being as imposing and magnetic as him. That death was also pretty permanent. Not even Wesker can survive taking an RPG to the face and then sinking into lava inside of an exploding volcano, while who knows how many viruses mess him up from the inside. But maybe he can? Resident Evil has often toyed with the idea of cloning, and finding out that the Wesker who died was a clone wouldn't be the most far-fetched thing the series has done. There's also the fact that Resident Evil 7 revealed that the Connections worked with Wesker's paramilitary group HCF at one point many years ago to create the E-type virus, aka the mold, while Umbrella Corps also hinted at the man still being around. Whether or not Capcom chooses to follow through on those teases remains to be seen, but they've certainly left the door open. One of the Bakers might return.
Zoe, wake up! Wake up!
A lot of the Bakers dropped like flies in Resident Evil 7 and its expansions. Ethan killed Marguerite, Joe Baker killed his brother Jack, and Chris killed Lucas. But there's still a couple of Bakers who are very much alive. There's the aforementioned Joe, of course, while Zoe Baker is also still around, thanks to the collective efforts of Ethan, Chris, and most of all Joe. Given the fact that Resident Evil Village serves as a direct sequel to RE7, and the fact that Ethan is obviously a prominent part of its story as its central protagonist, it's entirely possible that one of the two surviving Bakers, possibly Zoe, makes another appearance. Jill Valentine could come back. It's been a long time since we've seen Jill in a new Resident Evil story. Sure, she got the spotlight in last year's RE3 remake, and she was briefly mentioned in Revelations 2, but the last time in the series chronology she had a significant role to play was in Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil Village's events are set more than a decade after RE5, so where the hell has Jill been all this time? Fans have been hoping for her comeback for a long time now, and we think she might actually have a good chance of making an appearance in Village. Why exactly do we think that? Because of Chris. Chris Redfield has clearly gone off the deep end, and who better to pull him out of his funk and bring him back out of the dark side than his old partner and close friend, Jill Valentine. More to Chris than meets the eye. Capcom has made it abundantly clear that Chris has gone rogue in Resident Evil Village. They say that the game is going to tap into his character's dark side, and seeing as he kills Mia and kidnaps her and Ethan's daughter Rose, that is plain to see even from what little we know of the game's story so far. But this is Chris Redfield we're talking about. Obviously, he hasn't turned into a bad guy, right? As extreme and drastic as his actions may seem, there's definitely something else going on that we don't know about yet that's driving Chris, and we're willing to bet that he's going to be more of an anti-hero than an out-and-out antagonist. Rose is infected. Oh, and speaking of Ethan's daughter, why exactly has Chris kidnapped her? She's clearly central to whatever it is he's planning. He went to great efforts to get her into his custody, including killing the wife of a man who's pretty much a friend. So what exactly makes her so important? Well, she's Mia's daughter after all, and Mia was infected by Evelyn with the mold for a few good years. Is it possible that she passed on some of her genetic mutations to her daughter, and that maybe Chris needs whatever is in Rose's genes, or her blood or whatever to stave off an imminent threat? Chris becomes a werewolf. Werewolves are big in Resident Evil Village. Known as Lycans, they're a major threat in the game, and we've seen quite a few of them in all the footage for the game so far already. And there's a pretty popular theory going around that maybe Chris is infected, or will get infected, with whatever it is that turns humans into these feral beasts. And there's one pretty damning piece of evidence that backs up that theory. Capcom themselves have released a rather interesting piece of key art for the game, which sees Chris taking the spotlight with a wolf's eyes, fangs, and fur superimposed over the right side of his face. If that's Capcom trying to hint at something, they're not exactly being subtle. Chris will die. Chris Redfield has been synonymous with Resident Evil for as long as Resident Evil has been around, and he's got to be pretty old and tired by now, so maybe it's time for him to sign off. Resident Evil trailers have teased, in as many words, that his story comes to an end, and maybe that he they're referring to is Ethan, or maybe somebody else entirely. But it's also quite likely that they're talking about Chris. It would make a lot of sense for him to die at the end of a story that sees him tapping into his darker side, as blatantly as RE Village is doing. It would also make for a pretty momentous point in the story, and seeing as that this is the game that Capcom has made to celebrate Resident Evil's 25th anniversary, we're sure they're going for momentous in one way or another. Lady Dimitrescu is a tyrant. There's a lot of evidence that suggests this. Lady Dimitrescu has probably been around for very long, and was probably around even before tyrants were created by Umbrella, but she definitely has some connections to tyrants. She's unbelievably tall, and she has retractable claws, which is another feature we see in tyrants quite a bit. Might she have been the design that the original tyrants were originally based on? It's certainly possible. So what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day, and we would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.